A very good afternoon and welcome once again to Hampstead Synagogue Online. We're so desperately sorry that we couldn't do this event, this very prestigious event, in person, but circumstances once again do not allow for that. We hope and pray that it won't be too long before it will be second nature for do every event that we do in person again. My name is Gabriel Herman and I'm an executive member of the Hampstead Synagogue. And we specifically welcome our friends from Holocaust Memorial Day and all their supporters who may be watching us on social media. For their benefit, the Hampstead Synagogue in London is part of the United Synagogue, and that is why we're also being broadcast live on theus.tv, which is the video on demand service of the United Synagogue. You'll be able to find some material that is relevant to Holocaust Memorial Day on there currently. And you may also be interested in a recent conference that the United Synagogue hosted last year on the plight of the Uyghur community in China. The reason why I mention that is that two of the presenters of the conference, namely Rabbi Dr. Michael Harris, who is the rabbi of the Hampstead Synagogue, and Henry Grunwald, a member of our community representing World Jewish Relief, a charity, you'll be meeting them this afternoon. In fact, the charity World Jewish Relief started off as the Central British Fund and did so much to alleviate the terrible suffering of German Jews and then Austrian Jews just prior to the Second World War. There was a sizable Jewish refugee community around the Hampstead Synagogue in the 1930s. And the story goes that buses went along one of the main thoroughfares nearby, the Finchley Road, and the bus conductors, remember them, used to get to the Finchley Road underground station, and they used to shout out Finchley Strasse rather than Finchley Road. Whether that was to make the refugees feel at home or more alien is a moot point. The United Synagogue at the time was very Victorian in its outlook, and they were stickler for the rules. And one of the rules that they allowed us to break was the occasional sermon that we could do in German for the benefit of those refugees. After the war, there was another wave of Jewish refugees, and sadly, that was for Holocaust survivors. And Sabina Miller was one of that intake. Many of us will be thinking of very fondly Sabina this afternoon, including myself. What I should point out is that if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook, please do use the chat facility to put your questions to Olivia, and that will be possible because we are monitoring that facility. If you're watching live on theus.tv, we would ask you please to email us at info@hampsteadshul.org.uk. We'll be monitoring that email facility, and again we'll try to put your question to Olivia as once she's finished her lecture. So all I need to do now is to introduce you to Sandra Miller. The Miller family have been incredibly supportive of this initiative, and we are very thankful to them. And Sandra has very expertly told the story of Sabina's wartime experience. And one of the things that really shines through when we talk to the family about Sabina is that she had her own philosophy. And it's that philosophy that we're going to learn about as this lecture series proceeds. So enough from me. I'm now going to hand you over to Sandra Miller.
Thank you, Gabriel. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. My mother would have felt very proud had she known that Hampstead Synagogue would be honouring her memory in this way. She would have been totally delighted had she known that Olivia was delivering the inaugural lecture. Olivia Marks-Woldman OBE is a very special person. In her role as Chief Executive Officer of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, she's overseen the huge growth of Holocaust Memorial Day throughout Britain and massively increased the media coverage of the hundreds of events that now take place. Personally, I know that she makes a friend of every Holocaust and genocide survivor that she encounters through her warmth, her humanity, and her skill in making people feel comfortable in situations that may be far from comfortable. She gives people space to talk, to share their experiences, and the belief that someone is willing to hear them. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's my very real privilege to introduce Olivia Marks-Woldman OBE.
Thank you so much, Sandra. What a wonderful introduction. And thank you to everybody at Hampstead Synagogue, to Rabbi Michael, to Gabriel Herman, for organising this today with Sandra and her family. And a very special thank you also to Andy Shaw and Leo Mindell from Shock Audio Visual, who are making sure this can actually take place technically. No mean feat. Thank you, all of you. I heard about Sabina Miller before I met her. When I joined the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust in 2012, Sabina was already a favourite with the HMDT team, regularly inviting staff to her flat round the corner from where we're coming from today. Sabina had agreed to be in a short film for Holocaust Memorial Day Trust called Your Voice is Amazing, which was encapsulating the theme for Holocaust Memorial Day that year, 2012, Stand Up, Speak Out. Andy, could we have the first slide, please, which is taken a still from this film? Second slide, please. Thank you. My former colleagues had explained to Sabina that the film would start with a focus on the Holocaust and then highlight that the Nazis had persecuted other groups and communities, and then reference recent genocides. Fine, replied Sabina. What about the Jews? My colleagues repeated that the film would be clear that Jews was central to Holocaust Memorial Day, but that the film would also reference other groups. Yes, yes, replied Sabina, but what about the Jews? Again, they explained. Of course, said Sabina, but apple juice, orange juice, what would you all like? This is typical of Sabina, agreeing to support our work and then focusing on feeding us and giving us drink. Over the years, we made sure that all new starters in the team made their way to Sabina's flat. Despite our instructions not to go to any trouble, Sabina always laid on a feast. Sabina was always a staunch supporter of our work and was prepared to go along with all kinds of projects to help make sure that people could engage in different ways with Holocaust commemoration. In 2015, the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, Sabina participated in our creative project to keep the memory alive. She shared her experiences with an artist who is visually impaired, Kimberly Burrows, and allowed Kimberly to develop her creative. This wonderful picture is the result. Could we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So you can see stills from Kimberly and Sabina together, and in the middle is the picture that Kimberly created. But much as I felt that Sabina was part of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust family, I have felt embraced by Sabina's family, and particularly by Sandra, Laura, and Emily. And it meant so much that Sabina and Sandra could join my family at a Friday night dinner, and they could join us at my son's bar mitzvah. This Sabina Miller Memorial Lecture Series is a wonderful tribute to her, summing up her approach to life. She was perhaps defined by a generosity of spirit and a warmth of character, in such stark contrast to the horrors of her youth. Embracing difference was a guiding value to her life, and I'm immensely privileged to be giving the inaugural lecture. So it is perhaps with a little trepidation that I ask the question, embracing difference, is it too late? I am taking it as a given that all of us on this call believe that embracing difference is a good thing. Obviously, it's good for the other, who may be seen as different and who may face discrimination and hostility. But it is also good for all of us, not only in terms of how we benefit in terms of learning new things or meeting new people, but It diminishes us if we are perhaps closed at best or hostile at worst. People to embrace difference. It sounds melodramatic, but let's look at the evidence. I'm going to address briefly past, present, and future situations and scenarios that make it harder to embrace difference, and situations and scenarios that actively threaten a society that seeks to embrace difference. So looking at the past, first of all, recent history since the Holocaust has shown that genocides have taken place in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Darfur. Please, can I have the next slide? Thank you. These are all commemorated on Holocaust Memorial Day, when we reflect on the steps that led to each of these genocides, the propaganda, the stereotyping, the discrimination, persecution, and ultimately, murder. Communities wiped out because of their faith or their tribe. So that's the recent past, where we see, far from embracing difference, genocides have taken place. So what of the present? Well, there are a number of different threats, I believe, and I'll talk very briefly about political, social, internet problems, and so on. So politically speaking, we are seeing a rise in populism. Many European Union countries now have a radical right populist party with a significant vote share. These are building on dividing, not embracing differences. In Austria, the Freedom Party won 16% just in 2019. In Belgium, the right-wing Flemish Interest Party won nearly 12% in the same year, and the right-leaning New Flemish Alliance won 16%. We've seen similar situations in Estonia and Finland, in Hungary. But it's not only far left extremist views coming in from the fringes in Chile. The new president, Gabriel Boric, who was elected just last month, has made anti-Semitic communities, for example, anti-Semitic comments, for example. Another political problem, the refugee crisis, poses political and social threats to a world where differences might be embraced, but where, as millions of people are displaced and live in refugee camps or attempt to enter countries illegally, differences are often seen as threatening. Another current challenge to embracing difference is the internet. We have seen people access extreme views and conspiracy theories, where they live in online echo chambers, which normalizes extreme views, and it grooms people, taking them along a journey towards extremism. For example, somebody could start with a very non-extremist view, just an interest in maybe eating healthily and looking after their body. Online, to a position of, well, only put healthy things in your body. From there, they can be moved to an anti-vax position. From there, they can be moved to a conspiracy theory position, where they are told that big tech or the Jews are exploiting the vaccination system and the pandemic situation. On the internet, far, very fast. We have also seen the spread of what we call fake news and even deep fake news, where images and films are doctored in order to spread divisive views. There are other potential problems today that would threaten a view of embracing difference. There are situations at risk of genocide. Many of you have heard about or attended meetings about the situation of Uyghur Muslims in China. The independent tribunal established by the World Uyghur Congress concluded that genocide is taking place. There are many similarities, there are many differences to recent genocides. Nonetheless, we know that Uyghur Muslims are facing persecution and, quote, re-education simply because they are members of the Uyghur community. Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar. The International Court of Justice considered a charge of genocide brought by the Gambia and concluded that Myanmar must cease genocidal acts. There are other countries too, facing very serious conflicts based on differences between groups. Ethiopia is in the midst of a conflict, and so on. I mean, I don't think we've quite got enough time for me to go through all these potential genocidal situations. Closer to home, we could look at social differences and social problems that are threatening a philosophy of embracing difference. There is ongoing prejudice based on identity. Fortunately, in the UK, it is illegal for such prejudice to become discrimination, but it still continues. Not only anti-Semitism, but also anti-Muslim hatred, discrimination and hostility towards people simply because they are disabled or because they are gay. COVID has exacerbated increase based on blaming minority groups, with a wealth of conspiracy theories being developed and exploited just because of the pandemic. Moving on to the future, there are big issues facing us that I think cause us concern if we want to follow a philosophy of embracing difference. AI is not neutral. It is presented as such. Artificial intelligence is presented as neutral, as helping our world. But there are biases built into algorithms, as we're only just beginning to discover. Rather than embracing difference, AI may indeed be privileging white men, many of whom are the ones who develop the algorithms, under a guise of seeming neutrality. Just for example, it's been shown that AI readings of job applications have algorithms that favour keywords more associated with men. There's some evidence that automatic hand dryers in public bathrooms read white skin more easily than black. And a second future issue that I want to highlight here is the environment. The word has been coined ecocide. As resources become scarcer, as climate makes areas uninhabitable, there are more likely to be wars over resources and likely to have huge population migrations as a result of war over resources and as a result of areas becoming environmentally uninhabitable. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So while we may think of climate change as a rather generic problem facing everybody, I would flag up that there might well be serious problems based on difference. So I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the world is, in many ways, pretty bleak, and the threats that face us are significant, and that many of these are based or will be exacerbated by differences or perceived differences. So, as I give a lecture under the title of Embracing Difference, are there any counter-arguments or cause for hope? So let's take another look at the past, as well as looking at our current situation, and look towards the future. So first of all, looking at the past. Well, before the Holocaust, there was only a very weak sense of international justice. Indeed, the Holocaust prompted the coining of the term genocide and led to the creation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and prompted the first working international system of justice. The very fact that the genocides I mentioned in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Darfur were named as such, and perpetrators prosecuted and jailed in international courts and tribunals, are major steps forward. These are examples of people across the boundaries of nation, faith, and community coming together to insist that genocide, that ultimate declaration that differences are to be annihilated, not embraced, should be punished. So perhaps we should be looking at our past in terms of progress as well as the bleakness. So what about our current world? Well, politically, certainly in this country, the far left extremist views in the UK have gone back to the fringes, thank goodness. And what of the refugee crisis? Well, after Nigel Farage and others labelled the RNLI a taxi service for illegal trafficking gangs, the charity saw a record 2,000% increase in donations in a single day, receiving more than £200,000 in donations just in July 2021. The RNLI has shown us that the general public response to the refugee crisis is to give money and donations and to be welcoming. And I painted quite a bleak picture of the internet and the worst of extremism that we find there. Well, recent successes with Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, etc., and other platforms have shown them beginning to take more action and blocking accounts. The government bill on online harms is far from perfect and is being overhauled. Nonetheless, the signs are there that the government is beginning to make an attempt to regulate online spaces. Can we have the next slide, please? For those of us not quite young enough to have TikTok accounts, this is an image of perhaps some of the good that can be done on social media platforms. This is the platform TikTok, with an account set up by Lily Ebbett, a Holocaust survivor, and her great-grandson, Dov Foreman. Unless you've got exceptionally good eyes, you might not be able to see that they have more than 1.5 million followers of their account who regularly want to watch the posts that Dov puts there and to learn more from Lily's experiences. So perhaps we can see that social media can be used as a force for good and can in fact lead to people learning more and coming together online. And what about those current situations I mentioned that are at risk of genocide? Of course, it remains extremely worrying, but people are aware. The Rohingya finding I referenced shows that cases are being able to come to an international court. The fact that the World Uyghur Congress was able to set up an independent Uyghur tribunal are very positive steps. And well, the fact that hate crime, assaults and vandalism based on someone's identity and characteristics still persist, but they are just that. They are hate crime. They are against the law. The law in this country protects minority groups. We take for granted the advances that have been made in civil rights over the past decades. Equal rights for gay people, equal marriage, rights for disabled people, and so on. Many of these were utterly unimaginable only a decade or so ago. I also talked about COVID and how it has been exploited for very malicious ends. Well, maybe we should also consider the initial response to COVID. Clap for carers, when people came out on their doorsteps in their hundreds of thousands across the country to show solidarity with NHS workers and to be with their neighbours, albeit from the doorstep. There were thousands of people up and down the land collecting prescriptions for neighbours who were shielding, or doing shopping for those who felt unsafe going to the shops or who weren't able to book an online slot. And of course, I should point out that Holocaust Memorial Day grows each year. Even in a pandemic, there are thousands of organisations organising and running Holocaust Memorial Day activities to bring people together. And when they join, they are showing very clearly they are rejecting a philosophy of division and embracing a philosophy of embracing difference. Turning to the future, I mentioned two significant areas that I believe are worrying threats. Well, perhaps their information will be helpful in fighting environmental battles. I know there's a team in Michigan developing a solar glass product, for example, that will help capture sun's energy and convert it into electricity. There's an organization, Moonshot Prize. Artificial intelligence may also be beneficial to the future. Microsoft grants to teams applying AI technologies to planetary health, looking at biodiversity, climate, and agriculture. Additionally, AI may be useful in bringing people together. The Centre for Collective Intelligence Design, a UK charity, is looking into ways that AI can better create connections within networks of people working on a common challenge. I've whizzed through some big issues and some big problems, but on a day-to-day basis, what do we see in the world around us? Are we embracing difference? What I see around me are people who clapped each Thursday in the first lockdown, who go shopping for neighbours, or who pick up prescriptions. I see parents helping out other parents with ad hoc childcare in emergencies. I see young people volunteering at vaccination centres, people taking neighbours to hospital appointments. And of course, at this time of year, I see people choosing to come together with others in their communities to mark Holocaust Memorial Day, to learn about where prejudice and discrimination can ultimately lead, and to do what they can to make positive steps towards a better society. In Leicester, for example, the Museum and Art Gallery will run a whole series of events for Holocaust Memorial Day, including readings, an exhibition from the Wiener Library, showing films, and running workshops. The University of Essex has planned a programme of events, including a procession of light and a panel discussion. In Wales, in Aberdeen, in Oxford, in Newcastle, there are thousands of events taking place in person and online, despite the pandemic. Can we have the next slide, please? See photos of some of those activities and the map showing where activities are going to take place. And why are there just so many activities? It's not just because I've got a fantastic team. It's because people want to join with others. They want to embrace difference. They want to come together. Of course, it's not only Holocaust Memorial Day. There are many national and international projects that bring together enormous numbers of people. There's Mitzvah Day. There's Better Together, which set up the great get-together to celebrate what we have in common. There's Red Nose Day, where communities join together to raise money for underprivileged groups. These and many others bring communities together and help embrace the other. At the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, we seek to make a big difference to individuals and to communities. And we know that Holocaust Memorial Day activities really do make a positive difference to embracing. Learn more about the past. They increase empathy towards people today, and they go on to take action for a better future. So while I look around the world and see big challenges now and in the future, I also look around the UK and see people ready and willing to take on those challenges. I see young offenders in Polmont in Scotland, inspired by the story of Raquel Trollman, who was murdered by the Nazis because he was from the Sinti community, and those young offenders going on to share what they had learned with others. I see Muslim schoolgirls in Waltham Forest, inspired by Smayo Besso, who survived the genocide in Bosnia and who came to the UK as a refugee. The students went on to collect huge numbers of donations that went to Hackney Migrant Centre, who gave out gift baskets as a special festive family event. And some of the donations went to Care for Calais, East London, who distributed them to refugee families in need. 3 parcels were sent directly to 3 Sudanese single mothers who were in the UK with their children as asylum seekers, following persecution in Sudan, after all. So, embracing difference might not be too late. And we all know the difference made by Sabina Miller and by her family. Just as Sabina herself welcomed others so generously, Sandra, Emily and Laura and their families lead us all in embracing difference. Thank you.
Olivia, thank you so much for that. Absolutely wonderful. I'm sure everybody was paying so much attention to you that they were sitting back collectively in their audience seats, and they don't realise that they can actually ask you questions. So can we please get those fingers working and use the chat facility in Twitter and Facebook. If you're watching on the US TV, please email us at info@hampsteadshul.org.uk. And a lovely upbeat ending to your lecture. I was so relieved that we can embrace difference. That's a good thing. So we have some special guests with us this afternoon. And so I'm going to first of all call on our Rabbi Dr. Michael Harris, who has a question for you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you so much, Olivia, for a fantastic lecture to open this series of annual lectures, which we're so proud to be hosting. And thank you so much to Gabriel and to everyone who's been involved in initiating this project. Olivia, something you touched on at the very beginning of your lecture in terms of the juice and Sabina's hospitality. How would you advise that we negotiate the balance between, on the one hand, preserving the Shoah, the Holocaust itself, as our commemorative focus for Holocaust Memorial Day, and at the same time giving proper attention to subsequent genocides?
Thank you, Rabbi Michael. Yeah, that kind of cuts to the heart of the challenge of Holocaust Memorial Day. I think for the Jewish community, we are in sort of quite a privileged position. We have Yom HaShoah, which is our day for ourselves as our community to mark the Holocaust solely, which gives us an opportunity on Holocaust Memorial Day to commemorate the Holocaust and then give a little space for other genocides. And I think we need to do this because one of the first things we learn when we the never again slogan that everybody thought at the time just hasn't been true. So we learn right at the beginning that as we commemorate the Holocaust, we know that never again didn't happen because other genocides have taken place. So it's a sort of very natural progression of that commemoration thought. And as I tried to indicate in my lecture just now, the Holocaust was this defining moment that led to the concept of genocide and that also led to the concept of justice, international justice, that is, across borders, where leaders are saying, almost for the first time, not quite, but almost, to say, actually, there are some things that leaders, that a nation can do to its own citizens that are so transgressive that we need to intervene. So because the Holocaust was that moment, it then opens up into what happened after. So making that balance is always a hard one. And we're in no doubt at the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust that the Holocaust is at the center of Holocaust Memorial Day. But we know that when we educate ourselves about what happened, we necessarily learn that genocide followed from it. And Holocaust Memorial Day, as opposed to Yom HaShoah, gives us that space to learn and commemorate those other genocides too.
Thank you for that, Olivia, and thank you, Rabbi Harris. By the way, a challenge to you, Rabbi Harris. I think we need a prayer for online technology. And I still don't understand why we don't have one yet, but maybe I can ask you to work on that. Thank you for joining us. We're hearing that there are problems with YouTube and the chat facility. In that case, can you please email us on info@hampsteadshul.org.uk? And we have a question that's come in from Tim Robertson, who's actually the chief executive of the Anne Frank Trust in the UK. So a warm welcome to you. Overall, Olivia, how do you agree with Anne Frank's famous statement, "I still believe, in spite of everything, that people are truly good at heart"? A diary entry of the 15th of July of 1944.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Tim. Lovely to not quite see you on this, but to have you here. I'm afraid my internet cut out just then, and I think Gabriel was saying that quote about "at heart, I still believe people are good at heart." Thank you, Gabriel. It's such a beautiful quote and so poignant to coming from Anne Frank, knowing what we do know about her history. I believe that too, and I think that's partly what underlined my thinking when I know about how people are groomed online. When I talked about people making that journey, that doesn't sort of just happen to them. They are actively moved along journeys. And I think we all have to be so careful to protect that feeling of goodness and that feeling of wanting to embrace difference, and not to be swayed by things that might turn us from that path. And that feels a bit glib to say and a bit easy to say, but I think particularly on Holocaust Memorial Day, when we're giving ourselves that time to reflect, it just should be encouraging us to be critical about some of the things we read and we see, whether that's in our newspapers or whether it's online or whether it's what we see in our WhatsApp groups. And just sometimes to be a little bit critical if we're seeing things that are a bit sweeping about groups of people, if we see things about the refugees, for example, and really to try and protect that bit in ourselves that is a welcoming and a positive part of us, and to, if you like, kind of make that flame live so that we really do embrace difference all the time.
And we know that the news about Anne Frank recently, we're learning more and more as we go on. So there's a tragic element to, we think we now know how the Nazis found the family after all. Anyway, can I just tell you that Jason Horn, it says good morning from New York City. Can you please ask us a question, Jason? Come on, it's a challenge to you directly. I'm now going to go to one of our other special guests, Craig Leverton from the Holocaust Education Trust. Craig, I know that you have a question to Olivia.
Thank you. And firstly, let me pay tribute to Hampstead Synagogue and Sandra Miller for putting on today's excellent event. And Olivia, thank you for a wonderful presentation. You covered an enormous amount of ground in a short space of time, and it was brilliantly done. My question actually focuses, unsurprisingly, from Het, on education and the role of education. And I just wonder, as part of your wider optimistic look at addressing some of these challenges, whether there's a link between countries that have Holocaust and genocide studies on their national curriculum being taught in schools, so formal education, and slightly lower levels, I use the word slightly, lower levels of anti-Semitism and racism in their society, and what we can draw from that and what more we can do if that is the case to promote that more widely. Thank you.
Hi, Craig. It's lovely to see you, and congratulations on you joining HET in your role. That's such a big question, because I think education in its widest sense isn't only what happens in schools with young people, but as HET does, as we do, there are so many opportunities and kind of like a responsibility to make sure people can learn at all stages of their lives. And looking around the world, I suppose I would also think of Holocaust education as being that which comes from museums and sites where the Holocaust took place. And there's so many ways that people can learn about the Holocaust. I'm not sure about the research about showing that higher levels of Holocaust education in schools leads to lower is the sole factor leading to lower levels of discrimination and anti-Semitism. I'm sure there are lots of different factors at play, but I'm sure that Holocaust education is going to be a very important part of it. And the fact that the UK has Holocaust education mandated on the curriculum for those schools is really significant. And the fact that the government in the UK set up Holocaust Memorial Day and funds it almost entirely is also hugely significant. And I think all of us involved in this sphere know that we can't let up. We can't just kind of relax that we have Holocaust Memorial Day, that we have Holocaust education on the curriculum. We have to be vigilant. We can't ever be complacent, because although levels might be levels of anti-Semitism and an identity-based hostility might be lower here than in other countries, they still persist. It hasn't gone away, and some of them have recently increased. So we can't ever be complacent that our work is done. But there is, as I've indicated, so many opportunities for optimism, and knowing the young people who are involved with HET and how passionate they are about their work, such a credit to HET for the work that you do with so many young people, we know that our future is in good hands.
Thank you for that, Olivia. And actually, that's the theme of the next question that comes in from Madeline. And she says, how best do you keep Holocaust memories alive to transmit to the younger generation, to whom this is just ancient history, when that generation can no longer relate their stories directly? So I think it's about transmitting it to a new generation who will be further away from the Holocaust in their actual historic reality.
Thank you, Madeline, for that question. It's a really pertinent question. There are some very creative ways at making sure people of all ages actually can learn about the Holocaust, even if they can't hear firsthand from an eyewitness to the Holocaust. Pre-pandemic, there were nearly 20,000 different events to mark Holocaust Memorial Day. Yet their life stories were part of it. I know Sandra is doing such fantastic work with the charity Generation to Generation, which is asking children of Holocaust survivors to tell the life story and the experiences of their survivor parents. So there is fantastic work going on to make sure that people can learn about it without survivors themselves. But I think this question is also about how we all feel when we learn about the Holocaust. It's not only about, do we learn about it from a survivor generation? It's about all of us being further and further in history from the Holocaust. And I think what we learn is that there's a very Holocaust. I find it very powerful. It is that the Holocaust threatened civilization. So our very civilization has been threatened, starts to fray, starts to come apart simply because the Holocaust happened. And that's deeply worrying. You know, our whole foundations are that bit more vulnerable. So we have to protect civilization. And this comes back to what I said before about learning about the other genocides. Because although we know the Holocaust took place more than 75 years ago, we aren't confident that those foundations have been shored up, because genocides have happened again. And the processes that led to the Holocaust have happened again. And we can look around our world now and see certain processes in play that have very stark similarities. We see symbolization, we see groups being othered. And in Myanmar, in the Xinjiang province in China, we see people being put into re-education centers, we see hair being shorn from them. These things should make us feel that our world is a little bit fragile. And we have to do what we can to shore it up and to make it sturdy and to make our civilization strong, which is exactly what this lecture series is all about, embracing difference and making sure so that we all can live safely and live in a world that we all want to see. We all have to play our part in making that happen.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that, Olivier. And it's still not too late if you want to ask a question. Please do email us at info@hampsteadshall.org.uk, and we're still look forward to hearing your question. We have another guest, and I know that the Imperial War Museum recently overhauled their Holocaust exhibition. So I'd like to now bring in James Bulgin from the Imperial War Museum. Thank you, James.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you so much, Olivia. That was really interesting and fascinating, actually. As Gabriel was just saying, obviously, we've just opened new Holocaust galleries at the museum. And one of the things that was really on our mind whilst we were developing that is that there's been this kind of tendency, I think, perhaps within this country and further afield, to tell people that they ought to care about, victims of the Holocaust if they're not Jewish, because these are people who are just like us. And actually, of course, that's not necessarily true. That, the reality is that a lot of the people targeted weren't much like us at all. And I think one of the things which I've started to think about a lot is this thing of genuinely embracing difference. So I think the discourse has changed so much around this. We used to talk about tolerance as if, we sort of learn to live with difference. And I wonder sometimes if maybe the issue is that for a long time we've been talking about tolerating difference, and we don't actually talk about celebrating difference and allowing it to be different. And I sort of see cause for hope amongst younger generations now. They seem to be doing more of that, and I wonder if that's something you'd thought about too, genuinely allowing for difference, not just sort of forcing a commonality, because it strikes me that that's intrinsically bound to fail, because something that's not cohesive can never be fully cohesive. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Thank you, James. I think that's really, definitely something that we think about. We try to convey through our work that the processes could happen to anybody. And so in terms of, is it like us or not like us? Well, like us in the sense that people were living comfortably in their lives, happily with their neighbours, and yet differences were created or were exacerbated. And that in a way, so nobody can be really complacent that it won't happen. These things start small, they build insidiously. Genocide never comes out of nowhere, and therefore we have to be active in our protection of a civilized society. We have to be active in getting to know and to celebrate people who are different from us, whether it's a different age group or whether it's somebody who is from a different faith, or somebody who may or may not have a disability that we're unfamiliar with. So it's definitely something that we think about. And certainly a large number of Holocaust Memorial Day activities very deliberately bring together people from different communities. Obviously in a school, you're with your classmates and you're with the same group that you're always with, but events put on by local authorities, interfaith commemorations in universities of a Jewish society working with the LGBT society and the disability society to come together and to put on their own single HMD event that brings those different societies together. So it's definitely something that we're really aware of, and HMD it helps make HMD, I think, so effective.
Sure.
James, can I ask you a question? Because obviously you're bringing in various different communities to the Imperial War Museum. They're probably seeing the Holocaust probably for the first time. They're probably understanding Judaism for the very first time. Do you find that they embrace difference by looking at by the special exhibition?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as I say, it's one of the things that we were talking about a lot really early on. So I'm not Jewish. I'm not from a Jewish background, but obviously I've worked so closely, intensely around Judaism, Jewish culture, etc. And so, but I've always, I suppose, as a sort of a proxy visitor, had that sense of saying, how do I encourage people to understand things? And also, realistically, there are parts of this I will never meaningfully understand because it's not my own. And so it's I suppose for us it's really important to us to be able to say these people's rights to be treated properly and to be respected properly is intrinsic. It doesn't rely on the fact that they have to be like us, for them to have all these rights and protections and stuff, and we can allow them to be completely different and also to have exactly the same entitlements and expectations that we do. And I think that's something which we've really tried to do quite hard through the new interpretation, and to try and suggest we've just had some evaluation actually which came through last week, which is really gratifying, because it's showing that a lot of, because the majority of our visitors aren't Jewish, and it's surprising and gratifying, but surprising how many people coming through in the evaluation are saying, God, I had no idea that there was so much diversity and plurality in pre-war Jewish life and Jewish culture across Europe. I had no idea that Jewish people were living such diverse existences at different times in different places. And so, we worked really closely with different members of the community to do that. And obviously, I will always send my gratitude towards Rabbi Nicky List, because he's been such a phenomenally graceful individual to help us with the galleries. But I think for us, that was very much about not speaking on behalf of people, but to go out and speak to people. We got to the stage with Rabbi Nicky, actually, where Rabbi Nicky physically came in and put objects in cases himself, because we'd asked him before, when we were sketching it up, how should we display this, and how should we describe this, and have you done this right, and are you happy with this, and is this the best way of doing this? And at each stage he'd feedback, and in the end we said, well, listen, why don't you just come in and actually put it in the case yourself, because then we know that we have confidence that we've done this as considerately as it can be done. And I think for us, that was a really important thing, actually, to say, I don't want to make decisions on behalf of things that I can never fully understand. So we need to bring people in to do that. And that was a really, and I think this is part of my thing as well. I think, interestingly, a lot of other cultural institutions have spoken to us about this, and I feel like this will be a really important part of the dialogue moving forwards. Actually, institutions saying, listen, I don't want to do this on your behalf. Can we work together and create something which will? Because I think for a long time, people would just say, yeah, but we'll just do something like that, and I'm sure that would be fine. And I think in a way that's been part of the issue, not respecting and considering meaningfully different versions of the world.
Thank you, James, for that. For information, I'm sure you know that the Imperial War Museum was set up by Jewish people originally, and also in the General Imperial War Museum exhibition, there's a lot of talk about the camouflaging expertise in the First World War, and that was by a Jewish person, actually quite related to the Hampstead community. Anyway, all right, I'm going to let you go, James, because we've got a question that's come in from Cynthia Hollingsworth. Any thoughts about tackling the ongoing anti-Semitism in countries in Eastern Europe, such as in Poland? And she makes the point where few Jews now live and where so many were murdered in the Holocaust.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Did you hear that, Olivia?
Sorry, Cynthia's question was about anti-Semitism in countries such as Poland.
I'm going to send that to you in a text message, Olivia.
Thank you.
Can you?
Yeah, thank you. I'm a member of what's called the UK delegation to IRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Most people know about IRA because IRA developed a working definition of anti-Semitism, which has been extremely useful, but has been had a lot of publicity over the last couple of years. In fact, IRA does a huge amount of work beyond that definition. And one of those areas of work is about networking and bringing together countries in Eastern Europe, including Poland. So, yes, this is an issue I'm really aware of. And yes, there is work going on to try and tackle it. I think it's quite a broad problem. It's and maybe vandalism. It's also a question of how the nation commemorates its past. And there's a lot of work to be done there to encourage Poland to look honestly at its past and not distort the historical truth of what happened in the Holocaust in Poland. So yes, it's a work in progress, not only in IRA, of course, but that's a central plank in helping move forward on that. But anti-Semitism as a problem is a problem in very many countries, and it's not the same in every country. We, as members of a Jewish community, know how Anti-Semitism has changed. It's been, it's mutated, people say, and it focuses on different things in different places and in different times. So I think we also need to be alive to the fact that anti-Semitism today is not the same thing in every place, and in different ways often from how it manifests in the UK. I just wanted to add to the Anybody didn't see the programme on Channel 5 recently, I think it might have been yesterday or the day before, and then New Galleries. Do watch it on Catch Up, and do go and visit if you haven't yet. The New Galleries at the Imperial War Museum are fantastic, really thoughtful, really interesting, you know already. And a massive congratulations to you, James, and to all your team.
If you didn't catch that, Olivia was saying that Channel 5 recently had a programme on the new galleries in the Imperial War Museum, and it's well worth having a visit. So that's what if you lost their connection there. Olivia, one final question for you, and that's coming in from Sandy. How can we be sure that Holocaust Memorial Day will be commemorated in 50 years' time? And perhaps could you explain what you've got lined up for this Holocaust Memorial Day ceremony?
Thank you, Sandy. The easy bit first, and I hope you can bear with me through the connection. The Holocaust Memorial Day Trust has organised the UK ceremony for Holocaust Memorial Day 2022 as an online ceremony. It will be on Thursday evening, the 27th of January at 7 p.m. So do go to our website to register to watch it. That's www.hmd. 7 o'clock, and it will be the national ceremony bringing everybody together. And at 8 o'clock when it finishes, we're encouraging everybody to put a candle in your window at 8 o'clock in the evening to of remembrance for the millions murdered day who face prejudice just because of who they are. The question about how it will be remembered in 50 years' time is a real question for everybody on this call, not just for me. We know that the UK government is planning a memorial that will be a permanent memorial to the Holocaust to be placed in Victoria Tower Gardens. That memorial we won't be, but we will be here for a time when we can be doing our bit to pass on what we have learned, what we have heard, our memories of Sabina, and our memories of any other Holocaust or genocide survivor we've listened to. So it's a real responsibility on all of us to make sure that the people we're connected to learn from us about the past and then pledge to do their part to carry that on into the future, so that together across the generations, we're learning from the past for a better future.
Thank you, Olivia. I think that I don't know that there was an English comedian that made a whole act about a microphone that didn't work, and every second word disappeared. But I'm hoping that everybody got what you were trying to say. I certainly could hear it from here, but it made us all concentrate a lot more. So actually, maybe that's a good thing. I'm now going to ask for to see Henry Grunwald. Henry, are you there, please?
Gabriel, thank you very much. It falls to me to deliver, I suppose, the formal vote of thanks. You've been thanked many times during the last hour, deservedly so, Olivia. And I want to begin not with you, but with thanking the technical team who made this possible in these unhappy days when we can't be together physically. I want to thank everyone at Hampstead Synagogue who helped with the organization to make today happen. And I particularly want to thank Sandra and her family for having spurred us to institute this lecture in honor and in memory of a really fantastic woman. As Sandra said earlier, she had a very close connection with the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. I was one of the trustees for many years of the trust, and I can remember her turning up early in the morning on a Holocaust Memorial Day at King's Cross Station, where we were delivering the message of the day. And I think she was there even earlier than I was. And it was a memorable Holocaust Memorial Day They all are. But for her in particular, we managed to have her photo taken at King's Cross with the Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg, and then at the national event in the afternoon with the Leader of the Opposition, Ed Miliband, and then afterwards with the Prime Minister, David Cameron. And for each of them, I'm sure that was as meaningful as I know it was for her. She was a fantastic lady, always open to new ideas, which is very relevant to the message that you've delivered to us tonight. So Sandra and family, let's hope that this is the first of many successful memorial lectures, which will enable us all to remember Sabina through Hampstead Synagogue, which was such an important place for her for many years to come. Olivia, to you. I was a trustee at HMDT when you were appointed chief executive in 2012. HMDT was set up in 2005 to deliver the National Holocaust Memorial Day. And I have to say that under your leadership and guidance, the organization has grown enormously. Its reach has expanded and extended across the country. And people may not have picked up what you said. When HMD first began in 2001, there were maybe 20, 25 events up and down the country, mainly organized through or by synagogues, which is not what the day was intended to do. Under your leadership, that number has grown incredibly until, as you said, let me remind people, before the pandemic, there were over 20,000 events which were reported to the Trust to mark Holocaust Memorial Day, taking place up and down the country in venues so very different from any, I think, which were envisaged when the government sensibly set the Trust up. And that really is due to what you have brought to the organization and continue to bring with it. You've delivered to us a stimulating and thought-provoking lecture. As an aside, it was wonderful to hear the words, "Can we have the next slide, please?" said by you, and not then have to face a slide with COVID statistics. But you have made us think just how important difference is and how important it is that we respect it. I remember reading and do reread the book by the last chief rabbi, Jonathan Sachs, God rest his soul, The Dignity of Difference. And difference is so important, not just to us as Jews, but to everyone. And you have helped us look at the dangers to difference, but also the way that there are opportunities for difference to be respected. And James, you're so right. The word tolerance is not one that I hate. I don't want to be tolerated. Every human being deserves to be respected and not tolerated. But the work that HMDT does and the lecture that you've given us tonight shows just how that can be done. So congratulations on everything you've done as CEO. Congratulations on tonight's lecture. And I, for one, I hope everyone watching today will be tuning in at 7 o'clock on Thursday evening to watch the national event. Olivia, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Olivier, thank you so much. And Henry, thank you very much for those kind words as well. Olivier, they were all heartfelt on behalf of us all, so thank you. I should point out that Denise Keenwald is with us, and she also was very supportive of your lecture, so she thanks you as well. So I think that's about it, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, as Sandra said earlier. We hope to be together in person around this time next year for the next Sabina Miller annual lecture. But for now, a very good afternoon from Hampstead.